Christmas period is one full of fun, family, and fabulous memories, right? Wrong, especially if you got a house full of adolescents. Chances are that initial statement sounded like one of the best jokes to come out of this year's Christmas cracker. Even if you don't have a house full of teens or even know of any, I urge you to stick around for a little bit because what I'm about to say concerns the fate of humanity. Literally. But before we dive into humanity's Armageddon, let's roll things back just a little. So hands up if you've ever tried chatting with somebody born after the 1990s and been left completely perplexed by the interaction. Potentially felt like you're speaking two completely different languages. Maybe during this forced holiday period you dared to ask about their day, only to be met with a barely audible mumbled fine, while their eyes never once even shifted away from their phone screens. Perhaps unperturbed, you ventured a little deeper, determined to make this time unforgettable. Possibly suggesting going for a walk or grabbing coffee, and it's as though you're engaging in a conversation with a long since passed relative. Or even worse, you end up witnessing a full-blown meltdown resembling one of the final battles in the latest epic over something utterly trivial, like the Wi-Fi dipping for 5 seconds. It's so tempting to chalk it up to kids these days being spoiled, lazy, or just hormonal. But I'm sorry to be the one to break it to you. It's way deeper than that. And also a whole lot scarier. So the culprit? Social media and endless digital stimulation are literally rewiring young brains away from our current advanced state during the most pivotal and neuroplastic period of life, adolescence. Puberty, by design, already turbocharges the reward and social circuits, making our peers the centre of the universe. And this is why your little cherub turned into Satan's right-hand man or woman seemingly overnight. One minute they were following you around with pure adoration in their eyes. The next they couldn't care less if you stayed at work for 3 days straight. While you feel it as a knife to your heart, it's not you, it's natural and super important. Sadly, despite the endless sci-fi films depicting the end of humanity with the rise of the machines, with all of our perceived adult wisdom, we went ahead and did it anyway. So now our teens not only have to deal with growing up the same as we did, they also have to contend with the added algorithms designed to hook dopamine pathways. So have you ever seen one of those viral skits showcasing the difference between boomers, millennials and Gen Zs tackling the door, with the Gen Zs on the floor bawling their eyes out at the injustice of it all? Well, exaggerated for laughs for sure, but sadly rooted in real hypersensitivity from brains wired to be dependent on online metrics over offline nuance to function. So the tech we invented is literally reshaping how these brains process feedback, regulate emotions, and even empathize. And it's not just mollycoddling via ineffective parenting that's caused this tremendous downturn in our young people's capacity to cope. It's neurobiology meeting tech in a perfect storm. So buckle up, buttercup, we're diving into the science, and as always with a dash of humour thrown in to keep us sane, because honestly if we don't laugh we will cry. As adults we may scroll, post or completely ignore our social media platforms, sometimes for days on end, unbothered by the things that pass us by. We grew up without the constant instantaneous need for validation over every single and often mundane life choice. What we wear, what we eat, what we're doing is no one's business but our own. And sometimes we choose to let our friends in on what we're up to as a passive and polite way to preserve a friendship, because long gone are the days of putting pen to paper and writing a letter. In truth, if I didn't run a business, I wouldn't be as prolific on social media. I'd probably only post once or twice a year, way too caught up in actually living life rather than documenting it. As an adolescent, however, every ping, like or comment lights up the ventral stratum, which is the brain's reward hotspot, like the most gregarious Christmas tree, flooding it with dopamine. And if you've not heard of dopamine before, it's our feel-good chemical, which only stays in the system 1 to 5 minutes before disintegrating, which means to keep the good feeling flowing without resorting to illegal drugs, you need to actively do something to trigger another dopamine flood every 5 minutes. So fMRI studies, including massive ones like the ABCD project, which tracked thousands of kids, showed teens who habitually check platforms, so a minimum of 15 times a day, have increased sensitivity in this region, which means they need to do it more to get the same dopamine enhancing effects. FYI, this is the same neural circuitry that goes haywire in those who gamble or use substances to get their kicks. And here's where things start to go a little sideways for our teens. This overstimulation weakens the prefrontal cortex, so the PFC, which we have discussed in other posts in more detail, but as a little reminder, it's kind of like the brain CEO for planning, impulse control, and emotional regulation. MEG research from 2024 found that in more mature teens, beta waves, which are linked to focus and control, drop in the medial prefrontal cortex, while alpha waves, responsible for things like relaxation and insight, they weaken in social processing areas like the fusiform. Translation: our teens become wired for constant external hits, struggling to self-soothe or make decisions without constant validation. But that's not all. Those habitual checkers see an increase in delta waves in the prefrontal and occipital cortexes by 50% within 2 years. And delta waves are usually dominant in deep sleep for repair and will spike in the brain with chronic overstimulation, indicating exhaustion even while awake. Add in boosted gamma waves and we have the perfect cocktail recipe for hyperattention to social feeds. In a very short time, our youngsters lose the ability to foster the inner quiet needed for creativity or independent thinking. And in my professional opinion, if you've ever been wondering about the huge spike in ADHD diagnoses over the past couple of decades, then wonder no more. And if you weren't aware, in the UK, diagnosed ADHD cases in boys rose from 1.4% in the year 2000 to 3.5% in 2018. So based on what we now know, we're literally hardwiring our kids to be incapable of long-term focus and attention by allowing them free rein at all hours of the day and night on social media. Couple this with hands-off parenting trends, which, by the way, had me and many other psychologists aware of the decades-old studies into parenting styles and attachment theories, shaking our heads from the get-go, and we get a generation of individuals hypersensitive to social slights and vastly underpracticed in real-world resilience. I know I'm painting a bleak picture here, and unfortunately it's about to take a turn from a mildly flinching drama to a fully fledged horror film. And if you've scrolled through social media yourself, you've probably been gobsmacked to see gangs of young people witnessing real-time torturous events, never stepping in to help, instead standing around with their phones out, live streaming it to all and sundry. Yeah, the bystander effect does play a role here, but also excessive social media use has inadvertently wired their brains more tuned into psychopathy than empathy. And emerging research has shown that persistent and heavy use chips away at both empathy and real-world social skills. While some European studies show mild boosts in perspective taking from online chats with peers, US and global data showcase reduced effective empathy, which is that gut-level intuitive sharing of feelings with somebody undergoing a traumatic experience. The over-reliance on text-based communication between our teens has led to something called face-to-face displacement, which simply means fewer actual face-to-face conversations. While as adults we probably rejoice at this prospect, remember we already know how to interact with others in the real world. Our kids need this period to develop those skills. Less physical interactions with people means less practice, reading body language, tone or subtle cues, and ultimately leads to rusty skills for navigating conflict or connections offline. And at some point our kids will need to venture into the big bad world, hold down a job, find a life partner and keep the human race going, something they're now neurologically no longer capable of doing without someone holding the hand all the way. And in my opinion, having to do that takes parenting to a whole other level. Where we are right now is trapped in a vicious loop. Social media use is their fix, wiring them in for ever-increasing needs to use it and feel the same way. The more time they spend looking at their screens, the less they're able to interact in the real world with their peers, and then the psychological effects of non-stop comparison and rumination drives ever-increasing levels of anxiety and depression. Well, we're not technically breeding psychopaths because all kids are born without empathy, and it's kind of how the human race has survived. We're actively delaying maturation in prefrontal regions that makes us, well, fully human. No longer churning out armies of empathetic and resilient leaders, we're creating a world of terrified, bumbling buffoons. One day, these wild brains will run the world. Gulp. But don't panic, neuroplasticity to the rescue. few. Now here's the hopeful bit. Because I am holistic, not a doomsayer, brains are incredibly plastic, especially in youth. Decades of research show we can rewire pathways through intentional habits. It won't erase everything, but we can nudge their and our neurodevelopment back towards harmony, where we have stronger prefrontal control, a richer inner life, better empathy, and can guarantee the survival of the human race. So up next, you'll find some simple, practical, science-backed steps to help reverse the trend. Now, please don't be put off if you don't have kids in the house. These are still helpful for you. And as an added bonus, if you do have friends or family members around with impressionable teens, your house rules will at least ensure you're not feeding into the negative cycle. So first up, get them on board. Look, nobody's expecting you to turn your home into communist China to help reverse the trend. And in reality, this isn't going to help anyways. The kids will push back. Before doing anything, you need to help them understand what's going on and why the changes you're going to be making will be beneficial for them. Use this blog post as a springboard to help them understand why time away from social media is important to their long-term health and happiness. They need to opt in to living in a happier home environment. Forced compliance always leads to resentment, resistance, and then rebellion. Next up, digital boundaries with compassion. Work together to decide where in the home will be device-free zones, for example, bedrooms, or perhaps you have specific device-free times, such as meal times. Start small, even just an hour offline each day helps to rebuild attention via alpha wave recovery. Most importantly of all, if you're expecting your kids to do something, you best make sure you're also doing it. Don't be a hypocrite. If you demand they do something but you don't have to, they will lose respect for you and an entire shitstorm will ensue. Real world social practice. So embrace reality over social interactions where possible. Sign up to a sports club, join a local knit and natter, and even them chilling out around the streets is better than them or you hiding away in the bedroom. Face-to-face contact boosts oxytocin, which is our trust hormone, hardwires in empathy, and also helps to refine social skills, all things that we need to move forward humanely and respectfully. Next up, daily self-reflection. So encourage short daily journaling practices to help strengthen links between the prefrontal cortex and amygdala, enhancing emotional regulation. Step away from the idea of filling books full to the brim of the day's woes. Instead, start the day with a simple gratitude practice to help reframe self-worth beyond clicks, comments, and likes. Finally, open conversations. So listen without judgment. And anytime you hear something or see something which indicates a negative emotional attachment to event, experience, or person, simply reflect their words back curiously. For example, you seem frustrated when no one likes your posts. What does that feel like to you? Doing this helps build emotional literacy and also helps them to create the required neural networks in their own mind to process and analyze emotional information without overwhelm. Parents, teachers, policymakers, and even the random adult in the room who could potentially be in charge of a young person at work one day all need to do their part. And by encouraging and emboldening the young to embrace the richness of life offline, we help to harness neuroplasticity for their and our long-term good. These kids and many who are now already adults aren't broken. Their brains have simply adapted to a wild and novel environment. With guidance, they'll thrive, empathetic, regulated, and ready to lead. After all, humans have been around tens of thousands of years, survived potentially catastrophic events, and that isn't even including the great printing press panic of 1440. No one, including me, wants to roll into 2026 thinking it's already game over. The reality is the world hasn't ended. We're definitely not at the apocalyptic stage yet. But we do need to ensure that we take responsibility for what has happened and put steps in place to ensure things are righted as swiftly as possible. Here's to a fantastic new year and a potential turning point for the greater good. P.S. If you want some tools to rewire your family's habits and bring peace to your home in weeks, not months, sign up to join the Happiness Hacks Lab for your free 7-day trial. Mindfulness, boundary hacks, and more to build resilient brains. No credit card needed. Head over to thehappinesshackslab.com and the links in the show notes below. And I shall see you again next week.